my name's Bronwyn. I work with Syria UK and have helped organise this conference. And I would very much like, well, we've already met Mahmoud Hassino in a way. We've met him on screen, and we're very pleased that he was able to come here, despite his awful journey last night, which when his plane was delayed and he ended up in the middle of goodness knows where in London because his hotel room wasn't available. So he's... thank you for having to endure all that, and we're very sorry about that. Mahmoud is a journalist, blogger and activist, and he, as you saw on the film, he works for a counselling service for the LGBT community in Germany, in Berlin, but he obviously does a lot more than that. And I'd also like to welcome Brian Whitaker, who's a journalist specifically for the Middle East, and has written a book called Unspeakable Love about the LGBT community in the Middle East. So what I'd like to do is to ask them both to say a few words and to have a conversation between them, and then throw it out to you, the audience, for a few questions. And then we'll need to finish in 20 minutes. So, okay.
Well, great to have you here.
Thank you.
I'm just interested in how the film came about. I've done research in the Middle East into talking to LGBT people and so on, and a lot of what I saw in the film rings very true about particularly the problems with families and that sort of thing. But how did the film come about?
Ayse Toprak, the filmmaker, is a friend of mine. We had worked together in South Turkey on a film about education for Syrian children in South Turkey. And when I moved to Berlin, I got a visa to Germany and I stayed and applied for asylum. I regretted it because I had unfinished business in Turkey, which was actually like we had the Mr. Gay Syria thing happening 2 times before this one. So
the Mr. Gay Syria was a real event.
No, it wasn't really like an event like you saw in the film. We tried to spice it up for the audience, but we had 2 times Mr. Gay Syria who didn't get the visa. One of them was really close, but I was in Berlin during my asylum procedure, so I couldn't access my bank account, I couldn't do anything, so it was eventually a money problem at the end with the 2013 candidate. And so I was talking to Ayse about this, and she said, you should make a film about it. I told her, I'm not a filmmaker, maybe you do the film. And a few weeks after that, we started just going back and forth between Turkey and Berlin, trying to find a way to make the film. Yeah.
And tell us a bit about your work in Germany at present.
We have our organization is called Schwulenberatung, which means exactly literally gay counseling. They have been a social work organization directed at targeting gay men in Berlin for 30 years. In 2015 they started this queer refugee project. I started working there, and basically we counsel LGBTI refugees and asylum seekers and also migrants on their rights in Germany. We have legal counseling, psychological counseling, and we do also some minor social work because we refer them with the social work to other parts in the organization. We have been working for 4 years now, and this is basically it. We try to fight asylum decisions and correct them somehow if it's possible. Yeah.
One of the arguments I've heard quite often, particularly from people in the Middle East, is that there are so many problems in the region, so many issues. Mm-hmm. Isn't the LGBT issue something to be put on the back burner?
Yeah, but why are their issues more important than my life? I mean, who puts values on life? I mean, this is my response all the time. I mean, if it's, of course, we have lots of issues, but my life is valuable as well. I mean, it's as valuable as your life. So you cannot just like, put value on life like this.
Shall we take a few questions from people?
Has somebody got a microphone? Yeah.
Well, first I want to ask what happened to Husein and the guys in the movie. Are they still in Istanbul? What happened to his family after the Turkish attacks on Afrin, the Volga?
Yeah.
And also I want to thank you because it's so disheartening when they talk about LGBTQ issues in Syria in regard to ISIS, while homosexuality is punished by law in Syria. People who are arrested for being gay in Syria are raped and molested in prisons. It's not just ISIS. ISIS is more theatrical, but the abuse is going on and on and on. And it's really, really important, especially highlighting social oppression, which is even worse sometimes than the actual murder and torture of people. So thank you so much.
Yeah, Husein and Wissam are now in France. Husein got resettled to France with and Wissam as well. Wissam was there afterwards. Husein is working on getting his daughter. And what was like, part of like the delay in his asylum case was actually that he had a boyfriend and a wife in Syria. So, anyway.
That is a problem if you're applying for asylum.
Yeah,
actually.
exactly. Yeah.
Quite a big problem. They don't understand.
Yeah. Most of the guys that you have seen in the film are like, somewhere either in Europe or in Canada. Some of them are my clients now in Berlin. Yeah, I wanted to say this because like Brian and I were talking about this LGBT activism and LGBT rights, and like, I mean, for me, of course, I do believe that. I mean, I don't believe that there is any way that we talk about LGBT rights in Syria post-war if Assad is still in power. I mean, this is like, this regime has been oppressing us also, like, I mean, for many years. There are so many things that people don't know that like during the 80s and the massacre of Hama afterwards, like when the security branches, like, those mukhabarat thing were giving immunity, they were actually blackmailing, extorting, and torturing gay people throughout the 80s and 90s. So yeah, I mean, for me, it is a relevant thing to say this, like on a day dedicated to Syria. I mean, for me, my Syria is without Assad, and until then, like, I don't know what to do except like, just trying to do something for the LGBT refugees, and because for me there is no way to ethically I cannot negotiate with the mass murderer and genocider. So this is a very important thing to mention on such a day. Yeah.
I'll just butt in. A question that often comes up is what can people here do about this?
I mean, this is the thing. I mean, like I said, it's basically, I don't know, nothing. I mean, for the LGBT rights, it's nothing. I mean, for me, I do really believe, like, I mean, there are certain things that might change for the better in Syria, even if Assad in power, but this is one thing that cannot change with Assad in power. And what to do, I don't know. I mean, maybe keep the hope that one day he will be held accountable for what he did to the country and to the people. But until then, I don't know. I mean,
so helping
maybe vote better in elections. Yeah, and also vote better in elections. I mean, like, we're really having a horrible time as refugees in this continent.
Thank you very much. Very moving and very brave piece of work. And I'm really glad to hear what you've just said about that. As long as Assad is in power, gay people will not be free in Syria. But I wonder why. Actually, I was going to ask a different question, as you could tell before. But I wonder why that anti-Assad rhetoric wasn't there in the film. Now, which is kind of because the film is pretty neutral in relation to Assad. It talks about war in Syria and things like that, and then it mentions ISIS a little bit. My question, which I was going to ask, is, do you think maybe doing what you did in the film and people kind of starting to talk more about being gay and more openly in Syria, and the issue is starting to come out more into the public domain as a result of, or has been a result of, direct result of the revolution in Syria? We heard Husein saying, I am 24 and it's not acceptable that I'm being beaten up by my father. And I wonder if the revolution has actually contributed to breaking some of those taboos in the Syrian society where some of this conversation is taking place more. And finally, quick question about gay women in Syria and whether you could say anything about them.
You want me to be completely honest? Most of them, I mean, I don't believe that, like, you know, the civil society activists are actually, like, you know, doing anything to contribute to the, like, you know, to this global understanding of human rights, including LGBT rights. I know that, like, I have been to several discussions before, like, that wasn't related to the LGBT rights, and people afterwards, when they found out that I'm gay, they unfriended me on Facebook. For example, those are Syrian activists who, some of them were actually here today. So I mean, like, it's just like to say that, like, the revolution is contributing to anything, not now, maybe later, but, like, currently, no. This is one thing. You asked about ISIS and, like, about the film itself, like, you know, I mean, it's a documentary, so the characters told their stories. And at the time of filming, like, LGBT people were targeted in general in Turkey, and, like, of course, the LGBT Syrian refugees are more vulnerable to this, and certain people were being killed. Like, we were losing people all the time. So for them, this escape story was more relevant to them at the point of making the film. ISIS was mentioned because we did Mr. Gay Syria a few weeks after the Sultan Ahmed attack in 2016, so it was really present there. I mean, they did an attack, and, like, a few weeks later, we did Mr. Gay Syria. For gay women, yes, we didn't get money immediately. Actually, the jury was supposed to be like 3 women and a trans woman, and but they had left before we got any money, so to film. I think, like, you know, I cannot with the patriarchy in Syria in general, and all these things, of course, like, you know, I mean, of course, it is more difficult for cis women, and, of course, more even, like, you know, unbelievable for trans people. So there are so many Syrian lesbian activists and Syrian trans people who are talking more about these things. I mean, usually, I mean, it's even in Europe. Usually, you have gay rights and, like, you know, some additive. This is what we have normally. And yeah, of course, like, even the gay community, like, benefits from the patriarchy that is, like, you know, relevant in each society. So so it is more difficult for.
Back.
Yeah.
Oh. Right. It's all right.
First of all, I just want to say, I'm so glad I'm here tonight and not getting drunk in Soho. Can you just update us then on your campaign, resettlement? Are things improving, things getting worse?
No, we were shut down completely because, like, the German government didn't want to talk to us about it. So they said, like, there is no political will to talk about this. And it was like, you know, our original idea was actually to focus on this EU-Turkey deal. That we say that, like, you know, we put something into having like, you know, specified slots or quota of, like, you know, of those resettled people from Turkey, and the distribution of refugees from Greece. We need, like, you know, certain slots assigned for, like, LGBT people. And they said, no, we don't want to talk about it. There is no well. I mean, it's been like 2 years now, and back and forth about this, and yeah, we're being shut down completely about it, yeah.
There.
Just a question, and just out of curiosity, how is the Syrian LGBT activism fitting in within the LGBT activism in Europe and in Germany? Are they working well together? Are you facing any issues, challenges?
I mean, there is no, like I said before, like it's like, you know, there is no climate for this LGBT activism now, and so, I mean, you cannot talk about like those like, you know, different rights where, like, you know, the right to live is the first thing that is being violated in Syria. I mean, for me, I think it's more about like documenting violations. We talked about accountability. We talked about a lot of things. So for me, it's like different. It's about violations. It's about what's happening now, what's being done to LGBT people, and maybe in the future, with the hope in the future that we can actually talk about this. So basically, what you have in Europe now is like some kind of queer refugee movement. Whether they're working with the, like, you know, with the LGBT movement or not is like a different topic, because there is also like lots of racism in the gay community, in the white gay community as well. So, and we see that a lot, especially in Germany. I mean, it's really an issue for us, actually, as an organization as well.
There's activism in Lebanon. Mm-hmm. Is there much contact there between Syrians and Lebanese?
Yeah, I mean, I really wouldn't want to go there, but the thing is, I mean, the problem we had, I mean, it was always like this. Certain parts of Lebanon wanted to be the one and only LGBT activism in the Middle East, in the MENA region.
And imperialist LGBT activism.
So exactly, yeah. I mean, so like, you know, they were so really good at adapting this colonialist idea of, like, you know, we are the best and we need to teach people how to do their job. So it was a big problem to communicate with those. I mean, even when, like, you know, when certain activists in Lebanon started to try to do something different, mm-hmm. Those organizations were so big. At the end, like, you know, they tried to stop them eventually. So it is like a bit of a messy
and then
situation.
Syrians are actually discriminated against quite strongly in Lebanon.
Yeah.
Does somebody want a hand up there? Should we take you two together?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a piece of good news, Mahmoud.
Yes.
And that is that, according to The Guardian yesterday afternoon, it was online yesterday afternoon, 4 gay Syrians have arrived as refugees in London in time for Gay Pride. Mm-hmm. Now, unfortunately, it wasn't in time for us to contact them, or we would have let them know that you were here, because you probably know them anyway. Because how they got here really was under the vulnerable resettlement scheme. But that was 2 years ago. They were 15 of them were accepted for the UK, but there was a delay, as everywhere else, and so they went to court actually through lawyers in the UK, who just said that the delay was unlawful and risky to them. So 4 of them arrived this week. It's just a shame that we weren't able to tell them that you were here too.
Yeah, it's nice news that, like, you know, at least 4 lives were saved, but like we counseled 2,000 almost, like, you know, 100 individual in like, you know, in 3 years in Berlin, and if you count like 4, celebrating 4 lives being saved is nothing. I mean, there are so many lives at risk and danger, and yeah, of course it is good news for for the individuals themselves, but like for the whole thing, it's nothing. I mean, it's nothing, really.
This is quite a complicated question, so please forgive me for simplifying. And I'm not wanting to speak on behalf of other people, but when I lived in Amman quite some time ago, there were gay Jordanian and Palestinians who, perhaps it could be said, felt more of a community with gay Israelis, and there was a bit of a kind of cross-border kind of sharing of experiences and friendships and so on. probably, I think, facilitated by a feeling that sort of our national communities don't respect or include us, so what do we owe them? I say I am simplifying, and that may not be how they would put it or say it. You have touched on this, I think, a bit with some of your answers already, but I just wondered whether you could comment on Syrian LGBT people, sort of the degree to which they feel a kind of a sense of being cut off from other Syrians because of this, and or kind of wider Syrian activist struggles and campaigns. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's a process actually. Like, I mean, you first need to be like, you know, to be able to embrace your identity or this part of your identity, and then, like, you know, to be able to talk to people. I wasn't really excluded from anything. Like, you know, I mean, it's like socially at least. Of course, politically now it's different. Like, this is why I mentioned, like, you know, these misfortunes with being unfriended on Facebook and stuff. But basically, no. I mean, it's different, and it's of course people are afraid. I mean, if you have like this state-sponsored homophobia and transphobia, and you have all these things, and your religion is being used, all religions, like including like, you know, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, everything, all religions are being used in the region to oppress minorities, other minorities, and other people, like not only LGBT people. So of course you are afraid. You are afraid of being excluded. You need to be like a little bit braver and do the first step. And it doesn't, like, you know, it's not a simple thing to say, yeah, or to do.
I think we need to. I know the probably. People want more discussion. It's been a long day, so we're going to have to come to a close.